Hey guys, welcome to episode 8 of the What Comes to Mind series. Today we are talking about the brain and how it is beyond our imagination. So let's get started. So looking at the brain from face value, there's so many specialized and pretty cool things that I want you guys to know if you don't know already. And one thing that I always find remarkable is in terms of volume, the brain is about 2% of our body in terms of volume. Yet it requires 20% of our energy for it to function. Nearly 300 to 400 calories is just required just to think. So our brain requires some serious amount of juice just to function, and rightly so, because think about how much it does, and I'm hoping I'm going to try and demonstrate that in today's video. Think about the other aspects. Something called the blood-brain barrier is where only specialized and certain molecules can actually pass to protect the brain from potential damage. And that's why certain molecules in terms of drugs or certain phytochemicals or certain components are only suitable to go through the blood-brain barrier, whereas many other molecules which can pass through cell membranes can't actually pass through the blood-brain barrier, which is quite interesting. So I'll put an article in the description box related to that, because think about it as some very special pathway, some very special like border check, that only certain things can pass and certain can't. It's quite interesting. And within the drug world, that actually causes a lot of problems, because getting a drug to where one needs to go is a huge issue, and getting drugs into the brain is even more of a problem. Now, one remarkable thing that comes to mind when I think of the brain is the incredible feats that many people around the world throughout history have been able to accomplish. Savants or memory experts, people with photographic memory, eidetic memory, can remember dates or scenarios to the exact detail, and that's obviously to do with their very special and gifted brains. And those people who are geniuses in certain fields, those who are creative geniuses, it's remarkable to see them in action. Those who are maybe Navy SEALs or SAS and military forces who are able to endure so much amount of pain and then still carry on. And even athletes, because it's not just the physical side of things, it's also what the brain is able to stop and not stop, or do and not do, and how incredible it is when people or again, my tennis analogies, people are athletes playing for hours and hours, and the actual body is saying, I'm knackered, I can't keep doing it, yet they find a will and a way to keep going. And a lot of the notion of motivation and productivity and mindset is also related to how our brain is wired and what we do to influence that, but that's coming later on in the video. So the remarkable feats of incredible minds is something I will never be able to fully fathom or comprehend. And I'll put some little links in the description box of some people that I've really admired in terms of history and what they've been able to accomplish, and it's truly remarkable. So think of it in terms of the physiological standpoint. There are so many neurons in our brain, so these neuronal cells that do all the business. There are millions and billions of actual connections, neurons firing off to do all sorts of actions, to secrete or help our endocrine system, so our hormones, and they are then related to how we function and how we feel. And what boggles my mind when I think of neurons, as with any cell in the body, is these neurons are firing off between each other and causing changes to happen then in the body, or they are receiving a stimuli. So it's quite sunny and my eyes are squinting, and neurons are firing off to my brain to tell it to squint naturally. There are things that we do that are voluntary, there are things that we do that are involuntary, and there's also so many actions that are mind-boggling, and I find that remarkable to think that all that's happening in here, and that's governing everything that we actually do, how we hear, how we see. There are neurons firing action potentials off left, right and center in our body. And think, if you can try and count how many actions we do in a day, and think about how many neurons are being fired off to do those actions. And I think that's quite a big feat for something that's 2% of our body in terms of volume, don't you? Also, one thing I want to add is we have countless memories, good or bad, recent or past, and they are stored in these little areas called synapses. They're not even cells, they're like in between the neurons. It's kind of like a little gap, a little void that has certain areas. I think memories are so crucial and pivotal are stored in that area. It's quite remarkable. So what I wanted the main video to be about, or the main part of it, was how we imagine. So I'm looking at this camera right now and imagining the scene behind me, and also thinking about the day I grabbed a tennis ball when I was 7 years old, and the time I scored an amazing goal when I was 9 years old. That's all going on in my head right now. You can't see, but I'm looking at this lens. And all that's happening due to neurons, biochemical molecules, fat cells, axions, all of these terminologies and cells. I'm able to think about, the day Rafael Nadal won his 11th French Open title. I can see the shot that he is in my brain right now. I can imagine it. And that notion is pretty incredible, don't you think? So for you to imagine so many memories, good, bad, for it to affect you, for you to calculate something in your head, draw up a conclusion, all of that's happening in your brain. At the same time, I'm thinking about the scene that's right behind me. I find that truly remarkable that us as human beings are capable of exactly that. And when you think about the word imagination within the term brain, genuinely what comes to mind? Pun intended. And when I think about the brain as well, I think about a very personal story that happened when I was in school. I was around about maybe 12, 13, so it was in year 9 in UK kind of school terms. I'm not sure the US equivalent or around the world equivalent. And I was in science class. It was quite dark, it's quite hot and humid, and I was a bit claustrophobic. I didn't realize, and within about 5-6 minutes I was feeling a bit dazed, a bit weak, and I fell off the stool. So in those of you who are in the UK, when you're in school you have those quite high science stools. You're not sitting on like a normal chair, and I fell off and I banged my head on the back. So those in neurology may know the back is where your occipital lobe is, and it's related to many functions, but in my limited knowledge, it's also related to your eyesight. And I was dazed, I was knocked out for about 5 or 6 minutes, and when I got up, I could not focus my eyes. I could not see properly at all. And it was the first time ever where my eyes weren't functioning the way it would. I remember I was taken to hospital, my father had to carry me, like I was so young, and all of my senses were all haywire and could not focus, all because of banging my head. And there was some temporary alteration or effect to my brain. And for the first time during my limited life up until that point, I could not focus my eyes at all. And I keep stressing that because we sometimes take our senses for granted. We take our ability for our brain to function even in a so-called normal fashion. Yet I just banged my head, fell off a stool. I was diagnosed with a mild concussion, and within a split second everything went haywire. So now I look back many years later saying it was actually so humbling. Thankfully, there weren't further damage, but it made me realize that how delicate our brain is. Even though how powerful it may be, we were still learning something about science at that time. Yet within a small incident, I lost temporary function of something so pivotal for us. And unfortunately, some people don't even have that when they're born. So it humbled me now. I hope it humbled me and many others who may have similar scenarios. So if you had a similar scenario where you've had some sort of brain injury, do let me know. And how did it affect you at that time? Because I had something that was very mild. Some of you may have something that's quite severe, and that's not an easy thing to cope with. And to tie it up all together, I want to end on a term within the remit of neuroscience, slightly off topic, but I think relatable. And it's actually hormones. Our brains can trigger the release or the action or release of certain hormones, or the certain hormones that are activated in our brain that really affect how we live our life. Our entire personality can sometimes change because there are different levels of hormones being elevated or inhibited at a certain time. And as with all these episodes, your nutrition, your exercise, and your psychology can really make or break how you govern a day-to-day life in terms of your brain function. So there's certain foods that are inflammatory, that can increase the cortisol level, which can be related to anxiety, depression, stress. We also have certain addictions that we all in the neurology field are called dopamine fixes, that they release a sudden burst of dopamine that feel great, and we become very addicted to that dopamine feeling. When we exercise, We get a sudden rush of endorphins. That's why many sports psychologists will tell you sometimes we feel great after some form of exercise. And that's the endorphins flooding in. Serotonin is another hormone that can really affect how our brain functions. So I'm not going to go into all the hormones. One, because I'm not an expert. Two, not enough time. But I was wanted to shed light on how what we do externally affects what happens internally. So many people wonder, why are they really down or depressed? And there may be other reasons outside of your environment. Please don't get me wrong. But I find it hard to realize that we can really improve how our brain functions by doing little things again. We can improve and stabilize certain hormone levels which should be in certain remits, for a healthy, average, normal person. Yes, we are personalized. We have differences in terms of some are generally more active and more bubbly, some are generally more focused and driven. But sometimes we abnormally change those hormones because of how we go about our daily life. And then in this particular video, there's a reason why I mentioned those three things again. Because a condition known as Alzheimer's is heavily related to what we do in our environment. Only roughly 1% is purely due to a genetic or hereditary disease or condition. And a large part of it is to do with what happens over time. And many of you may know, who may not know, Alzheimer's is something quite frightening to see for a person to have, and really debilitating for a person to have it themselves. And in my opinion, if there's something we can do to try and minimize our risk and reduce our risk, I would think we would want to do that. And I'm sure you would do, and I would hope you do too. There's something like Alzheimer's and these neurological diseases. Some are unfortunately purely hereditary, but there are some that we have slightly more control over. And I hope me and I hope many others, those of you watching this video, we do our best to try and look after our brain. I mentioned yesterday about our heart, but even if our heart is pumping really well, but we can't function well in terms of doing simple actions, that's going to have a profound effect on how we live our life. And then little things that we can do in terms of our nutrition to minimize inflammation in our brain. If you can do similar exercises that we enjoy, that we like to do to improve our endorphin release and help our hormones secrete really well. And if you can look after our psychology and having that good company I mentioned yesterday, and genuinely having that, we can minimize our risk where possible. Prevent the preventable. And this is another classic case of just that. Hope you enjoyed today's video. Do let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. I'll be really interested to hear your stories about genuinely what do you think of when you think of the word brain. I'm going to try and enjoy some more greenery and some forests. If nature is truly something else. Do stay safe, and I look forward to seeing you tomorrow with another brand new video. See you soon. Bye bye.